Happy Friday. John Lorden here with your weekly episode of BrainScratch. Thank you so much for joining me here today and for helping on causes like we're looking into today. You know, after 5 years of doing this show, every single case feels different to me. And I know sometimes we see similar themes or similar things that happen in cases. I've never seen something quite like we're going to see in the case we're looking at today. This episode is really one part case cracked and then one part BrainScratch. And we have law enforcement asking for very specific help from you that could help them potentially identify other victims or could help them strengthen their case against an accused serial killer. So while we're going through today's information, you're going to see a section of the screen where there are multiple photos of women. And I'm going to keep that going through the whole episode. And here's the reason why. Starting with an article at NBCLosAngeles.com, mystery photos found at accused serial killer's home. Let's watch a quick video clip and see what this is about.
Women, I don't know who they are. And my concern is that either they're missing or they're dead. They could be the victim of something.
I don't know about you, but the impression I get from the detective is he was quite a bit nervous, and I don't think that had to do with the cameras in his office. I think he is very concerned that someone in these pictures that are scrolling right below me might be an additional victim. But even if they're not, there's another aspect to this. They might have information that actually helps the case against the suspected serial killer. And we're going to learn more about him today too. Police in Burbank said the women seen in a cache of photographs discovered during a search of an accused serial killer's home could be important clues in the man's upcoming murder trial. So let's roll back the clock a little bit. We're talking about the death of a young woman, Mary Susan Duggan, and that is back in June of 1986 at the age of 22, and she died in Burbank in LA County, California. Now, here at Find a Grave, we have a photo of Mary, and in the flowers section, there's a very interesting message. Your killer was caught in 2019 thanks to genetic genealogy. Rest in peace. Now, it's not just Mary we're talking about. We're also going to look into Selena Ann Keogh. Hope I'm saying that right. She died on the 16th of July in 1981, and she was either 21 or 22 years old. Her death happened in Montclair in San Bernardino, California, not terribly far from Burbank. But here in the flowers section, we also have a very similar message. Your murder was finally solved in 2019 with the help of genetic genealogy. Rest in peace. I believe this is a photo of her. Thank you to someone at Web Sleuths. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a good source of information for myself, so it might be incorrect, but I do believe that this is a photo of Selena. Trying to find information about these cases, of course, when you're looking into 1980s cases, it's always tough, especially trying to find that on the internet. I even tried running some searches in a newspaper's archive subscription that I have. It really didn't pan out much more, but I have been able to find a couple of reprinted articles from the Los Angeles Times. I think it's really great when news agencies take the time to do that, go through their back catalog and digitize that stuff. It's very helpful. And you can see there's a practical use for it. This case is now once again current because we have charges that have been filed just as of November of 2019. But I did find this publication, which is called The Print. It's the official publication of the Southern California Association of Fingerprint Officers. And this is from July, August of 2001. There's a little mention in here that might give us some insight into what happened and also give us some sentiments from her family. Waiting for Justice is the name of this section. In Montclair, police detectives haven't forgotten Selena Keogh, The 21-year-old woman raped and killed in 1981 while walking home from the club Unicorn, then located at 5074 Holt Boulevard in Montclair. Montclair Police Detective Roger Price was a student at Montclair High School around the time of the Keogh murder. He didn't learn about the case until last year while preparing to attend an FBI seminar. It was a sergeant who originally worked on the case years ago who told him about it. The circumstances surrounding it were tragic, and the effect that it had on people surrounding the victim made it stick out in the officers' minds, he said. A DNA match would be good news for Sabrina Plord, Keogh's younger sister. Plord said that even 20 years later, the simplest things bring her back to that day when she lost her sister. She thinks about it when she goes to her car at night and won't go for walks alone. It's hard. It will always affect me, she said. It will affect my children and probably their children. Now, these are her sentiments back in 2001. And now here we are in 2020, and finally we might see justice happen for this family. Let's move on to the other case. Here is a posting from the Los Angeles Times from back in June of 1986. Burbank police are investigating the death of a Reseda woman whose nude body was found inside a rental car early Monday, authorities said. The victim was identified as Mary Susan Duggan, 22, who lived with her father. There's another article that comes out a few weeks later, June 28th, 1986, also from the Los Angeles Times. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office concluded that she died of asphyxia. The woman, Mary S. Duggan, had a moderate amount of cocaine in her blood and a .11 blood alcohol level. Burbank police discovered Duggan's body in the early morning hours of June 9th under newspapers in the hatchback of her 1980 Ford Mustang in a parking lot near the intersection of Glen Oaks Boulevard and Cohasset Street. Police have no suspects in the case. Now, at the time of the discovery, of course, one of these things happens in 1981. The other one happens in 1986. So we've got some years that are going on between these two occurrences, but there isn't an immediate linkage made between these two things. You've got different police departments that are handling these cases, and just consider that we're talking mid-'80s. I mean, where are we at in terms of information sharing between those departments, centralized databases, and all that kind of stuff? I mean, we're nowhere near as advanced as we are now. So thankfully, a few decades later, there would be some match that was finally made between those two cases. And I believe that was a DNA match. Essentially, they had DNA from both scenes. They started pushing that stuff into centralized databases, and all of a sudden, they got a match back that connected these two cases. We now knew these two cases probably had the same assailant. But even knowing that it was likely the same suspect in both of those cases, that still doesn't solve the case. You now need to get that DNA to match to someone. I assume at that time they went and they ran it against the database they had for known criminal offenders. Nothing comes back, but we get to the past few years where these cases have been cracked wide open, thank you to genetic genealogy, and we finally have progress on this case. From the Burbank Leader. Prosecutors used genealogy search to make arrest in 1986 killing of Mary Duggan. Los Angeles County prosecutors filed 2 counts of murder against a man linked to a pair of decades-old cold cases by connecting the suspect through a genealogy match. And this is posted November 15th of 2019. Horace Van Valtz Jr., 64 years old, was charged with the 1986 killing of Mary Duggan in Burbank and the 1981 slaying of Selena Keogh in Montclair. The victims, killed 5 years apart, were both strangled and sexually assaulted, according to investigators who are seeking to match Van Valtz to additional killings based on the similarities in the two crimes. I'm also seeing some other names possibly kicked around for him. Horace Van Valtz Jr. is certainly the one I'm seeing most frequently. But Devlin is another name that I'm seeing come up in some searches with him as well. And I'm just including that information because I'm hoping someone out there that's going to see this video, see one of those pictures down below, maybe that name will make more of a connection than Horace. I don't know if he was using that name back in the 80s. Maybe he was going by different names or something like that. So I'm just trying to include everything that I can. I have also bumped into some information that he might have been, I don't know if he was kicking around the club scene or somewhat in the music industry, but there's some connectivity around that too for that time in the 80s. But most importantly, you need to know what he looks like. Here is a picture of Horace Van Valtz currently, or close to current. And I've also got this photo of him, which is a much earlier mug shot. So I'm just hoping that this information is going to help jog someone's memory out there. Lacey said prosecutors ran DNA collected from the initial crime scenes in Burbank and Montclair against a commercial DNA database. It's very interesting to me that they're using that terminology. Most of the genetic genealogy stuff that we've seen has been done through an open source DNA database, which is GEDmatch. I know GEDmatch has recently been sold. I don't know if it's considered a commercial database at this point because of that, or if they're using something else, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, something along those lines, which isn't completely out of the scope either. We know that law enforcement has been trying to get warrants and subpoenas for information from those commercial systems. Here, they're calling it straight out that apparently they did run this through some type of commercial DNA database. The 64-year-old's DNA was matched to the killings through an item plucked from his trash last month. And I do think it's important. I'm just going to say it again. I know I've talked about this, but the genetic genealogy, even if it gets you pointed to a specific person, that's what the police will use in terms of taking their next investigative step. But they're not done at that point. They want to get a direct DNA sample from that person and match it directly to the DNA that they've collected from the scene. And really, that's what actually solves the case. You can think of the genetic genealogy almost as signposts that are pointing them in the right direction. Hey, it's probably a person in this family. It might be these cousins, or it might be down to this group of brothers. But really what cinches it, what really makes these cases cracked, is when they do that extra step of following the person around. Sometimes they'll grab a piece of chewing gum from them, or they'll see that they throw a bottle in a trash container. They'll go grab that bottle. They'll run tests of the person's DNA based off that information and then connect that directly to the crime. And that's exactly what they've done in this case as well. Both Duggan and Keogh's families asked not to be disturbed. Sergeant Derek Green, public information officer for the Burbank Police Department, said Duggan's family described her as the life of the party, who often frequented venues in the Southern California local music scene. Investigators declined to say if Van Valtz knew either of his alleged victims or why he chose to target them. Keogh's strangled body was found under bushes in Montclair. Duggan died of asphyxia after a tissue was stuffed down her throat, prosecutors said. While these cases seem kind of similar, we have a sexual assault combined with asphyxiation of some kind. The type of asphyxiation is somewhat different between the two. In Selena's case, we have what looks like a strangulation, and in Mary's case, we have a tissue stopping her from breathing. So let's continue with some more information over at lacounty.gov. It marks the first time in Los Angeles County that a criminal case has been filed using the innovative forensic tool, and they're talking about genetic genealogy. Thanks to advances in technology and forensics, we are now able to virtually reach back in time and find those responsible for these vicious crimes, District Attorney Lacey said. I do think that that's one of the most powerful things about this as well. Some of these cases that we thought might never be solved, the East Area rapist, he might have got to the end of his life before that case was ever solved. How many years does that guy have left? I do think that's amazing about this, and I do want to see more of these cases solved in this way. Horace Van Valtz Jr. was charged today with 2 counts of murder with the special circumstance allegations of multiple murders and that the crimes were committed during a rape and sodomy, as well as lying in wait for each victim. The defendant faces the death penalty or life in prison without the possibility of parole if convicted as charged. A decision on whether to seek capital punishment will be made at a later date. It then goes to say that they've set up a designated tip line. Of course, I've been running that phone number right down below on this screen the whole time. But if you have information about either of these cases or any of the women in the photos down below, please call that tip line and please send that information in so they can act on it. And despite the fact that we have 2 crimes that happened in 2 different cities, Burbank seems to be kind of taking the lead on this. That's why the tip line is there. So please do use that. Learning more about this case over at courthousenews.com, Valtz has a criminal record, but his DNA was not in any criminal database. I did some digging around this and I couldn't find his criminal record. If you guys are able to find any links to that, please include them in the comments down below. I'm just curious. I've seen some comments from the investigator saying that with the type of criminal record that he has, that they're kind of not surprised about him being the suspect for these crimes. I did also see mention of another case out of Ventura County where I do believe they tried to charge him, but the trial, they didn't get a conviction. So I'm curious if anything can happen around that. I think since they tried to try him, they can't try him again. But I'm curious if maybe any aspects of the evidence from that case is going to get introduced or used in this in some way. And I'm very curious, is that if he is the guy for these 2 cases, did they just mess up the court case somehow? And is he truly responsible for that murder as well? Are we talking about 3 victims here? Lacey said commercial genetic testing services like 23andMe and Ancestry.com helped law enforcement compare DNA left at the crime scenes where Keogh and Duggan were found and narrow it down to a pool of suspects. Now, I can tell you, I don't think these companies are thrilled when their names are included in statements like this because they realize a big part of their business is selling some level of comfort to the people that are using their services about their privacy. So, of course, a spokesperson for 23andMe, however, said the company does not voluntarily work with law enforcement and has never given customer information to law enforcement officials. The company publishes law enforcement requests publicly in a transparency report and has so far successfully challenged requests by police for its customers' data, the spokesperson said. When pressed, a spokesperson for Lacey's office declined to comment where it got the DNA data. I'm pretty sure this is going to come up in court. I'm pretty sure that the defense is going to try to find out, well, they're going to be told because of the discovery process, who provided the DNA information. They're probably going to try to go to that company and say, hey, did you know it was being used that way? I imagine they would try to do all that because they're going to try to get all of that thrown out. The thing that's interesting to me and why I really want to see one of these go to trial to see how this gets hashed out is, like I was mentioning before, that information is just used as the signposts. That's not really the information that actually cracks the case. What cracks the case is I've got this sample from the crime scene. I followed your guy around. I got this sample from him, and now these things match each other. So I'm curious, but it's weird because you don't get to that second step without that middle piece of using one of these services. And I don't know if a judge is going to say, well, if you found that information by using one of these services, then anything that came as the result of that now has to be excluded. I'm just very curious to see how all that's going to play out, but I think we've got a little time before we're going to know which way that goes. And really, I was wondering, talking about someone that has murdered 2 people, is that what makes them a serial killer? I seem to recall hearing from some other sources that there had to be at least 3 murders. So I did find this article at Psychology Today. There's a lot more to it, and if you want to read more about it, of course, I'll have it in the sources down below. What defines a serial killer? According to the FBI, a serial killer is someone who commits at least 3 murders over more than a month, with an emotional cooling off period in between. It's kind of an interesting way to identify it, but I think I understand what they're getting at. They're trying to disassociate a serial killer from some type of like rage incident where, someone goes off and they wind up killing a bunch of people, and it's all within the same period of time and kind of all in the same emotional and mental state. Here, I think they're trying to make the distinction that this is someone that does it, goes back to their normal life, has time to think about what they've done, and then something brings them back to doing it again. And I don't know if that's them, wanting another thrill of what they have gone through or fantasizing about the previous one, but there's this kind of oscillating pattern of they act out, they go back to normal life, they act out, they go back to normal life. And once they do that 3 times, at least according to the FBI, they consider them a serial killer. But we get a different definition here. A serial killer very commonly has a deviant sexual motive. The National Institute of Justice provides a definition of serial killing that is closer to the common conception. According to them, it involves committing 2 or more murders with a psychological motive and sadistic sexual overtones. On this conception, serial killing can be understood as a type of sex crime, a monstrous version of normal male sexuality, which, of course, we know that males aren't the only people that can be serial killers. So this definition, even in this article, they're saying there's some problems with this definition as well. But it does seem to touch on that same theme of there's something that's motivating them. It's kind of, there's a pattern of normal life, and there's a pattern of some type of ramping up into, if it is a sadistic sexual act or if it is some other type of psychological motive, but some type of oscillation and opportunity for them to stop it or to say, hey, I know what I'm doing here and I'm going to go do it again. Like I said, there's much more to this article and you guys should really check it out. But for this case that we're talking about in particular, we've got the same DNA tied to both sexual assaults. Both the women were also murdered. I think we are looking at what would be considered a serial killer, definitely by the National Institute of Justice's definition. With the FBI, they're saying it's at least 3 murders. So kind of in that gray area. What do you guys think about that? I want to hear more of your thoughts in the comments down below, because I'm not sure if either of those definitions really kind of captures it all. So we've got charges filed. It seems like Burbank is kind of being the lead agency on this. What's going on around all this? What about the family? We've got some more information here at mynewsla.com. The victim's family members declined to speak with reporters, but Lacey said Duggan's family wanted to thank the law enforcement agencies involved in the case, whose efforts came together to find the accused after so many years. San Bernardino County District Attorney Jason Anderson said his office agreed to allow vaults to be tried in Los Angeles. That's another important factor. We're talking about different counties altogether. Because the Keogh family has waited for 38 years to get justice, and we don't want them to wait any longer. Burbank Police Chief Scott LaChase told reporters that we never forget about these cases and credited more contemporary technology with helping to identify vaults as the suspect. There may be several other cases out there that need to be investigated based on who the suspect is and what the circumstances of the crimes were, LaChase said. So I think the Burbank Police Chief is kind of pointing a little bit of a nod in that statement towards the photos that I've been showing in this episode down below. It does leave me wondering if pictures of Mary and Selena were actually in his home as well. That information isn't out there, at least that I can find publicly, and it could be that they're holding on to that for some type of prosecution advantage or something. I don't know if that's a factor in this, but it would certainly be a different statement to the public to say, hey, we found a stack of photos and we know two of these photos were from victims. But you heard it directly from the investigator at the start of this episode. There's enough cause for concern, and there's other benefits to finding those people as well. Here's an article from abc7.com from November 18th, 2019. Vaults made his first court appearance, but did not enter a plea. Outside of court, his defense attorney, Damon Lamont Hobdy, said his client is prepared for the court battle. Well, that pretty much lets me know which way the plea's going. Mr. Valtz maintains his innocence, Hobdy told reporters outside the courtroom. Surprisingly, Mr. Valtz has taken this very well. He understands that this is going to be a fight. Yeah, it's kind of strange he didn't enter his plea because it's obvious which way he's going there. Back in another article at NBCLosAngeles.com from December 19th, 2019, a Bakersfield man pleaded not guilty Thursday in the murders of 2 young women in the 1980s. So no big surprise there. Valtz, who had been under surveillance, was arrested November 14th during a traffic stop in the Inglewood area, according to Burbank Police Detective Aaron Kay. Kay said he had a criminal history that predates the advent of DNA databases and that he has remained jailed without bail since his traffic stop arrest. Valtz's attorney, Damon Lamont Hobdy, described his client last month as a retired widower. He was enjoying his life, enjoying his family, the defense lawyer said. It is a devastating thing for his family, but they're handling it pretty well. Valtz is due back in downtown Los Angeles on January 28th, when a date is scheduled to be set for a hearing to determine if there is sufficient evidence to allow the case against him to proceed to trial. That's the last of the court updates that I have at this time. I haven't seen anything else kick out since then. The January 28th date might have been pushed. That's not totally uncommon in some cases like this. They've got a lot of logistics that they have to figure out. And I know the defense is going to be pushing to try to get some of that DNA stuff tossed out, or they're going to be looking for experts to question the validity of it. But there is another interesting aspect to this. Horace didn't live in California his whole life. Man charged with murder in 2 1980s California killings has ties to Fort Worth, Texas. Law enforcement authorities are hoping to hear from people familiar with him from his time in North Texas. So I also just wanted to put that out there. I know that we have people that are watching this show all over the place. They're saying specifically he has connections to Justin, Texas and Fort Worth dating back to 2012. So is this going to point us to more potential victims? I don't know. But also keep in mind, they could be just looking for the social circle. Is there someone that's going to step up and say, hey, you know what? He told me about one of these occurrences, or he told me about some specific item or something along those lines. So I think there's more than just, the hunt for more victims going on here. I think they're looking to strengthen their case against them in any way they can. Now, what about these pictures that have been put out? Inside Edition, I believe, is the first organization to have put out the original set of pictures. They actually had to thin it. They removed 2 of the photos because of this. Woman recognizes self, one other, in photos found in accused killer's home. So obviously, this method is working. We already have someone that has stepped up, and obviously, they're still alive. They're not a victim. Following last week's release of nearly 24 photographs of unknown women found in the home of alleged killer Horace Van Valtz, 2 of those pictured were identified over the weekend as alive and well, police in Burbank, California said. Detectives continue seeking the public's help in identifying the rest of them. One of the women told police she recognized herself and another woman. The images of the 2 women, who appear to be in their 20s or 30s, have since been removed from the original article. Kay said he could not release the women's names due to the pending criminal trial. It is not known how their photos ended up in Van Valtz's possession. Once again, will they have information that helps this case or not? Who knows? Could they have known the victims in some way? Maybe they were all in the same social circle together. There could be some pieces that are really important around that. If they did see Horace with one or both of those, of Mary and Selena. So there's a lot of different ways that this can go. Case said he hopes releasing the photos to the public will help police discover new leads and identify any new witnesses in the case. That sounds a little bit different than the clip that we saw at the start of this. He added that Van Valtz knew a lot of people around the time and was hesitant to label the women in the photographs as victims, which I totally understand. I think it would be irresponsible for them to come out and say, hey, you know what, all these pictures, we think that all these pictures are victims. Even in the comment he made earlier, while he's worried about that, I think it's clear that that is a concern and not a statement. Van Valtz has pleaded not guilty to all the charges. His defense attorney, Damon Hobdy, told InsideEdition.com that his client maintains his innocence and is prepared to fight the charges in court. He did not comment on the photos being found. It's really strange to me that we don't just have, hey, can someone ask him about these photos? What is this? You know, are these former girlfriends? Are these people that he had one-night stands with? Are they simply people that he was attracted to and for some reason he was collecting pictures of them? It's just, there's all kinds of different aspects. Who knows what this cache of photos is, but I do think it's important that if nothing else, these women know that they might be part of a case against a man that might have killed 2 women. So in the links below, I will also include, there's 2 different threads on web sleuths that I have found on this information. Of course, everything else that we've used to go over today's case will be down there as well. And I'm just hoping that we can get these photos out. So please share this video. Let's raise exposure to this case. This case is not done. We have a man that is innocent until proven guilty. We've got police that it seemed like are working very hard to find more information to connect to him. Does that include potential victims? Sure. But I think they're also looking for, as they were saying in that last statement, they're looking for more leads, more witnesses. So the women in those photos might be very important to doing that. Before I end today's episode, I want to thank several new patrons, starting with Maria Silva, Melissa Stefan, and Octavio Cervantes. Thank you so much for helping to support the channel. If you'd like to do the same, you can visit www.lordandarts.com. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you back here on Monday with an episode of Case Cracked that might touch on some more genetic genealogy. I hope you'll check it out. I'll see you here on the Lord and Arts channel.